The day Japan realized it couldn't win. They saw the horizon turn black. At first, it looked like a storm, a shadow crawling across the water. But it wasn't thunder. It was steel. Thousands upon thousands of ships cutting through the cold morning mist, forming an endless line across the sea. The officers in the room leaned closer to the map, their faces pale under the dim light of a single flickering bulb. Someone whispered, "It's begun." No one answered. They didn't have to. The sound of the teletype machine already said everything. Constant mechanical clicks echoing like gunfire. A message arrived, trembling in the hands of a young officer. The Americans. They've landed. For a long moment, the room fell silent. Only the soft buzz of an overhead fan filled the air. Then, one admiral, old, weathered, the weight of decades carved into his face, muttered something that made every man freeze. This was our biggest mistake." Before anyone could ask what he meant, another officer cut in sharply. "Wait, look at this. There's more coming." They turned toward the coastal surveillance chart. A second wave was approaching, triple the size of the first. Someone finally spoke 5 words that ended all debate. "They're not stopping this time." Those words would be remembered for decades, studied in military academies and whispered in secret archives. Because in that single moment, Japan's high command knew the truth. The war they had started was now a storm they could never control. The moment of realization. June 6, 1944. The date was burned into history. June the 6th, 1944. D-Day across the world. In a quiet, heavily guarded room in Tokyo, Japanese generals stood frozen around a radio receiver. Static crackled through the air. Then came the reports. Thousands of Allied ships hitting the beaches of Normandy. More vessels than anyone in Europe believed even existed. They listened in silence as American and British forces stormed through the French coast. It was the impossible, made real. One general's hands trembled as he reached for a cigarette. He couldn't light it. The match shook too violently. The others didn't speak. They didn't have to. Everyone in that room understood what this meant. Admiral Yamamoto's prophecy was coming true. But Yamamoto wasn't there to see it. The man who had warned Japan against attacking America was already gone. Shot down in 1943. His aircraft torn apart in the Solomon Islands. But his words still echoed through every military mind in that room. The prophecy remembered 3 years earlier. Before Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto had delivered a warning that chilled even his closest allies. He said, calmly and precisely, "I can run wild for 6 months, maybe a year, but after that, I have no confidence." The message was clear. Japan could strike first, but it could not win a long war against the United States. His superiors ignored him. They called him cautious, even defeatist. They wanted a quick victory, a glorious empire stretching across the Pacific. And so, Pearl Harbor happened. Now, 3 years later, as D-Day unfolded in Europe, those same leaders stared at their maps in disbelief. Every word Yamamoto had spoken was coming true. Word for word. One officer reached into his briefcase and pulled out Yamamoto's old report. The edges were worn, the paper yellowed from age. He laid it on the table and pointed to one sentence underlined in red ink. "If war comes with America, our only chance is speed. If it drags on, defeat is certain." No one argued. They didn't need to. The proof was right in front of them. Not on paper, but across the seas of Europe. Because that morning, the Americans had sent 5,000 ships across the English Channel. Japan's entire remaining fleet, all that was left of the WWII Imperial Navy, numbered barely 50, the industrial nightmare General Hideki. Tojo stood by the window, sunlight spilling across a stack of intelligence reports. His face was tight, unreadable. The numbers on the paper were worse than anyone had expected. America was building one aircraft carrier every single month. Japan needed 3 years to build one. American factories ran 24 hours a day, 3 shifts, endless production. They produced more airplanes in a week than Japan could make in 6 months. Tojo exhaled slowly and said the words no one wanted to hear. "We have awakened a sleeping giant." Silence fell over the room. Those were Yamamoto's own words after Pearl Harbor. Whether he truly said them or not no longer mattered. The metaphor had become reality. They had indeed awakened the giant. And now the giant was walking. But buried within those reports was something worse, something none of them had expected. The Emperor's question-as-summons arrived from the palace. Emperor Hirohito wanted answers. It was unusual. The Emperor rarely spoke directly about military matters. But now he demanded a briefing. The generals and admirals entered the Great Hall, bowing deeply as they set maps and reports before him. Hirohito looked calm, almost emotionless, as he asked a single question. If America can invade Europe with such force, what will they bring to Japan? The room froze. No one dared speak. Finally, an admiral answered, voice trembling, "Your Majesty, they will not need to invade us." The Emperor leaned forward slightly. "Explain." And so the admiral revealed Japan's nightmare. The truth that kept their strategists awake at night. America no longer needed to fight island by island. They were building bases, extending airfields, and preparing long-range bombers. The Pacific was shrinking. Soon, the enemy could reach Japan directly from the skies. But before he could finish his explanation, an aide rushed in, clutching a telegram. His hands shook as he handed it over. The message was short. Only 5 words. The Americans are coming back. The 5 words that changed everything. General Tomoyuki Yamashita read the message twice. He didn't need a translator. He knew exactly what it meant. General Douglas MacArthur had kept his promise. He was returning to the Philippines. But this wasn't just a territorial loss. It was a death sentence for Japan's empire. If the United States took back the Philippines, they'd be within bombing range of Tokyo. The generals unfolded their maps once more. They could see the pattern forming, the Allied strategy tightening like a noose. Germany was collapsing in the west, which meant soon all of America's strength would turn eastward. One officer finally said what everyone feared. "We cannot win this." No one disagreed. But to say those words aloud was an act of rebellion, almost treason. The secret discussion. That night, behind closed doors, a smaller group of Japan's most senior commanders met in secret. No aides, no records, just whispers in the dark. For the first time, they discussed the unthinkable. Surrender. But the problem was deep in their culture. In the Japanese code of honor, surrender was worse than death. A warrior died fighting, not begging, and yet the facts were undeniable. America was demanding unconditional surrender, which meant Japan couldn't even negotiate to protect the emperor. To accept meant humiliation. To refuse meant annihilation. They were trapped between honor and extinction. One general finally offered a desperate idea. "We cannot win, but we can make them pay. We will make their invasion so costly that America accepts a negotiated peace." Heads nodded slowly. It was the only strategy left, to trade blood for time. But none of them knew that in the deserts of New Mexico, a new weapon was nearly ready. A weapon that would render every calculation meaningless. The final realization. 1945. By the summer of 1945, Japan stood alone. Germany had surrendered in May. Italy was long gone. Now it was just Japan, facing the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union. Night after night, American bombers filled the skies. Entire cities burned. Tokyo became an ocean of fire. Osaka, Nagoya, Yokohama, all reduced to ash. Millions were homeless. Thousands died each day. And still, the military vowed to fight on. They planned Operation Downfall, the last stand, an invasion of Japan itself. Estimates said millions would die, but to them, death was preferable to surrender. Until one morning, everything changed. August 6, 1945, Hiroshima at exactly 8:15 a.m. Chandri confronted Twan. A single American bomber appeared over Hiroshima. One flash, one bomb, one city, gone. Tens of thousands vanished in an instant. Those who survived were shadows burned into the pavement. 3 days later, Nagasaki followed. The destruction was beyond imagination. Even the generals who had sworn to fight to the end stood speechless. For the first time in the war, Japan's high command truly understood. This was no longer a war between nations. It was survival against extinction. The words that ended it, all August 14, 1945. The Imperial Palace once again filled with the highest commanders. Half wanted to surrender, half wanted to keep fighting. The debate was fierce, emotional, and hopelessly divided. Then Emperor Hirohito entered the chamber. The room fell silent. He spoke calmly, in the formal court language of his ancestors. The war situation has not necessarily developed to Japan's advantage. It was the most understated sentence in modern history. Everyone understood what he truly meant. Japan had lost everything. Then he said the words that ended the Pacific War. Words that still echo through time. We must bear the unbearable. Those words became the bridge between annihilation and survival. Japan surrendered. Unconditionally. The world exhaled. Epilogue. The prophecy fulfilled as the surviving officers sat in silence. The memory of Yamamoto's warning returned once more. He had seen this outcome long before anyone else. The unstoppable rise of American industrial power. The quiet determination of a nation that refused to lose. The men who watched D-Day unfold in that Tokyo command room had understood the truth. From the very beginning, from the moment they saw those thousands of ships crossing the horizon at Normandy, they knew Japan's war was already lost.